Okay, welcome back to Restaurant to Another World. Anime Review episode number 12. This one was discussing the 20th episode of the series, which is called Roast Beef slash Cheesecake Again. Now, these two episodes come from two different books again, obviously. This one covers chapter 74 of book 4 and chapter 5 of book chapter 82. I'm like, that's interesting. Yes, in the case of chapter 4, this is the that's not one of the special chapters per se. I think this is like the third chapter they come from the book. For 5, this is roughly the second episode they've done it for. Yep. Now, first one, roast beef. This one is simply put, basically focusing on a character named Roanoa. Now, you're probably thinking, wait, didn't you just discuss an anime like a couple months ago where it has a character with the same exact name? Yes. Definitely. That was, believe it or not, it was actually How Real is Hero of the Kingdom. Yeah, just by sheer weird coincidence, I come across a character in another anime with the same exact name, except this character is not a princess in our country. Like, they confirmed this episode. She is a freaking vampire. Yes, has the fangs, the black eye, and apparently she can fly. I'm like, really? She can fly? Vampires have flown before. They don't sprout freaking bat wings. I'm like, that's weird. I mean, I know they transform into bats in some versions of the vampire lore, but growing black wings? Seriously? Yes, this is kind of weird to say the least. So she goes and flies out in the stroll, and she just hits some wind, crashes down, and just by sheer coincidence, there's a restaurant. What the Western restaurant? Like, there it is. There's the door, and she goes in and like, oh, and she sits past the and she's a demon. She's about to attack her, and we have basically in this episode, Carol is basically on like anti-violence mode, where she stops her from hurting Anita, which that was actually quite genius to do that. Because she took out basically her long fingernails. Now, yes, I have seen in many forms of fiction, vampires do have long fingernails. And the woman can tell you vampire side from the teeth is the freaking bite marks on her neck. Now, those, you don't see those very often a lot when you see vampires in fiction. Yeah, I thought that was quite weird, but that's basically what it is. She sees two people who look very similar to her, and I'll sit by them. And, well, it is confirmed thanks to the conversation they have. Well, they also ordered the roast beef, which I've had roast beef, and man, in case you're curious though, have I had roast beef like this? Yes, this is how roast beef is normally served, but it seems like a very small quantity of roast beef. Usually when I have roast beef, usually the piece is a little bit bigger than this. I usually have a couple pieces. Usually it's like a big long thing that we usually cut out with an electric knife. So they eat it. Now, for me anyways, when I dip roast beef into something, I dip it in ketchup. Not this, whatever this seasoning is. So they eat it, and it's basically Romeo. He's the one who details the whole thing about the vampire nation, which was discovered by the elves, which that's interesting, and discovered that apparently people can become vampires simply by being bitten. I'm like, yeah, that's definitely true. Apparently the vampires are nobility in this particular nation. Like, okay, a lot of the stuff they say of vampires is mostly true, and also apparently they're weak against sunlight. Yes. I'm like, okay, I like the fact that a lot of parts about the vampire lore correct here. And it's basically Romeo, basically the one doing this, which I thought was quite ingenious. And they do confirm that, well, they two are kind of vampires, but they don't have the vampire teeth per se. Yeah, and of course they mentioned in the debut episode that they were born with their eyes like that, with their faces. And in this episode, yeah, they kind of confirmed they are in fact vampires. Yep, they are definitely indeed vampires who apparently block out sunlight. Apparently, these two must come from a different country than what they come from, because I thought it was quite ingenious. the fact they had a vampire in here. Now, I do like the whole thing of vampire stuff in here, which is something that I kind of suspect these two were, given the fact that they were pale and the black eyeliner, and like assuming these two don't sleep very much. Yeah, this episode kind of confirmed those two are definitely vampires. Mm-hmm. Yep. All about being creatures of the night. They hinted at that in their debut episode. Here, it's just a follow-up to it. And it's great, though, we got a chance to do that. Mm-hmm. And, of course, they go off, and who knows they're going back in. And the next story is also another follow-up. This time, it's Cheesecake again. Heidi is back. Now, I should point out, though, the two people with her are two people associated with her. Excuse me. And their names are Alicia and Rajia. Rajia, I believe, is from, like, they confirmed this episode because she did appear previously in another episode featuring Cheesecake, which I believe was actually also the debut episode, believe it or not. Yeah, that was debut episode. Beefsteak was actually episode 2, so we actually have 2 follow-ups here. Like, wow, 2 follow-ups to episodes we had this season alone. Like, wow, that's quite interesting. So, they mentioned the whole thing about Lord of Black stuff and the Goddess of Darkness. They kind of hint that Kira might be the Lord of Black. So, yeah, I noticed that she's looking at the moon. The one thing the series has not explained is why in the world the moon looks the way it does. Did some kind of big magical attack affect it? Because when Kira first got there, the moon was already like that. So she didn't do that. It was somebody else. As for who turned the moon like that, the series, as far as I can tell, never explained it at all. So, they basically have some cheesesteak, and of course they were 3 of the same thing. They enjoy it. And of course, Alicia and Regia, of course, by the way, the Regia sees the prince and princess from the Land of Sand, and of course meeting with Princess Aldred from the Empire. And mentioned, oh yeah, this is the restaurant they met, and it mentioned about the whole thing about previous relations. So basically, it's a good follow-up to various stuff they have here. So you can kind of say this is a follow-up to not only Cheesecake one, it's not only a follow-up to that, but also kind of in a way, it's mostly a follow-up to like a few other stuff related to it, which I thought was quite partial follow-up to the previous story. When, of course, they had those two first show up in the thing, which I was quite nice. It's basically not like it was indirect follow-up to that too. So they decided to form a team together, and they're pretty successful. And they get back to the restaurant, and then then pretty much they bring out their weapons. Now Heidi has got a knife. I believe that Alicia's got a crossbow. Actually, no, yeah, I think Alicia got the crossbow. No, Alicia's got the axe, and Rajia's got the crossbow. And as soon as they take them out, of course, Nita's there, and of course, they're about to start arguing over Cheesecake with freaking weapons. And Kiro just goes around, swipes the weapons from them. Like, what the heck happened? And it's like, no violence in restaurants. I will not tell you again. I will hold on to your weapons until you're done. And she brings it right behind the counter, and the master's like, what the heck? What did you do with those? I took them from customers. They'll be gone before, and I'm like, okay. Is it weird, though, the fact that the master does not appear in this episode until, like, the very, like, last couple minutes? And, of course, Kara goes off, and see her go off. Not Anita, surprisingly. I think this is the first episode we don't see her go off back to the other world. Kiro, yes, I'm glad that we get a chance to see her when she arrives, and then transforms back into her dragon form, per se. Now, of course, the Red Queen herself does not make appearances in this episode. I think she's made in this season so far like 1 or 2 appearances the whole entire season so far, but I'm sure she might come back in the future. Yep. Now, next episode is basically going to be Mockery Grittin and Fruit Jelly. That's going to be quite interesting, which I'm looking forward to that. Yep. Excuse me. But yeah, that's it, particular review. Stay tuned. My very next video will be Case Closed. Yep. And if it aired today, because sometimes basically do this thing where they skip a week. And it did. Thank you for that. So, until you see the next video, bye.